40 years old, and somehow the number in your bank account doesn't match the number of years you've been working. You've had jobs, you've had income, you've shown up, paid bills, kept things moving, and yet here you are, looking at a savings account that should feel further along than this, carrying debt that was supposed to be gone by now, quietly wondering how everyone else seems to have figured something out that you never quite got the memo on. That feeling isn't weakness. It isn't failure. It's actually one of the most honest moments a person can have with themselves. And if you're sitting with it right now, good, because that kind of honesty is exactly where real change starts. Before we get into this, if you're new here, hit subscribe. I put out videos every week on money, mindset, and the stuff nobody really explains properly. There's already content up on the channel that could genuinely shift how you think about your finances, so go check that out after this. Okay, let's talk. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're 40 and feeling financially behind. The panic you feel right now, that tightness in your chest when you think about retirement or savings or the next 10 years, that panic, if you let it, will cost you more than any bad financial decision ever did. And today we're going to talk about why, and more importantly, what to actually do instead. Here's what most people get wrong about being 40 and behind financially. They treat it like a character flaw, like the logical conclusion of bad decisions, laziness, or some fundamental personal failure. And that story, the one we tell ourselves at 2 in the morning, is almost never the full picture. The reality is that most people who find themselves financially stuck at 40 got there through a combination of things that had very little to do with willpower or intelligence. Maybe you spent your 30s keeping a household running on one income. Maybe you went through a divorce, a medical situation, a job loss, or a period of just surviving something that cost you everything you had, emotionally and financially. Maybe nobody in your family ever modeled what healthy money management actually looked like, so you were essentially building a plane while trying to fly it. Maybe the system you were working within, low wages, rising costs, a housing market that moved faster than your savings ever could, simply didn't give you the runway that financial advice assumes everyone has. None of that is an excuse, but it is context. And context matters enormously when you're trying to figure out what to do next, because if you spend the next 10 years beating yourself up for the last 20, you will waste the most financially productive decade you still have in front of you. 40 is not the end of the runway. For most people, it's actually the beginning of their highest earning years. Your experience has value now that it didn't at 25. Your ability to focus, to commit, to make decisions without the chaos of early adulthood, those are real financial assets. The question isn't whether you can catch up. The question is whether you're willing to stop mourning the years behind you long enough to work with the years still ahead. Let's talk about what actually catching up looks like, not in theory, but in real, practical terms. The first thing to understand is that time in the market still matters enormously, even starting at 40. People assume compound interest is only for the young, but here's what's actually true. If you start putting away even a modest amount consistently at 40, you still have 20 to 25 working years ahead of you before the traditional retirement window. That is not nothing. That is genuinely significant. A person who invests consistently from 40 to 65, even starting from zero, can build a foundation that changes the quality of the last third of their life in a very real way. It won't look the same as someone who started at 22, but it doesn't need to. It just needs to be enough for your life. The second thing, and this one is psychological as much as financial, is that catching up at 40 requires a different strategy than building wealth at 25. At 25, time does a lot of the heavy lifting. You can invest small amounts and let decades of compounding do the work. At 40, you need to be more intentional, more focused. The margin for passivity is smaller, which means the first real move isn't finding the perfect investment account. It's getting brutally honest with where your money is actually going right now. Most people who feel broke at 40 aren't broke because they earn too little. Though that is sometimes genuinely true and we shouldn't minimize it, but more often they're broke because the gap between what comes in and what quietly leaks out has never been properly examined. Subscriptions, convenience spending,
debt minimum payments that have been running for years, lifestyle costs that expanded with income but never contracted when income dipped. The money is often there, it's just moving in directions that were never consciously chosen. So the first practical move is a real, honest audit. Not a punishment, not a budget that makes you feel like you're in financial prison. Just a clear-eyed look at the last 3 months of spending and a simple question: is this money going toward a life I'm consciously building, or is it just happening? That distinction alone can free up $200, $300, sometimes $500 a month for people who do it seriously. And at 40, with 20-plus years of potential compounding still ahead, that freed-up money invested consistently becomes something meaningful. The third piece is debt, because for most people in their 40s who feel financially stuck, debt is the single biggest anchor. Not because debt is inherently shameful, it isn't, but because debt serviced month after month is money that never gets to work for you, it works against you instead. The psychological weight of it is real too. Carrying debt for years creates a kind of learned helplessness around money, a background hum of anxiety that makes it harder to think clearly about financial decisions. So getting intentional with debt, not panicking about it, but actually making a plan, is one of the highest return moves available to someone starting at 40. This doesn't mean paying off every debt before investing a single dollar. The math on that is actually more nuanced. High-interest debt, like credit cards, should absolutely be prioritized aggressively because the interest rate on that debt almost certainly exceeds what any investment would return in the short term. But lower-interest debt, a car payment, a manageable personal loan, can often run alongside modest investing without derailing you. The point is to be intentional rather than just reacting, to have a plan rather than just minimum payments on autopilot. And then there's income, because sometimes the honest answer is that the gap isn't just behavioral, it's structural. 40 is also the age where many people have enough experience, enough skill, and enough professional credibility to ask for more, to negotiate, to look at adjacent opportunities, to think about whether the thing they've been doing for 20 years could be packaged differently, as consulting, as freelance, as a productized skill. This isn't hustle culture. This isn't telling you to work 3 jobs and sacrifice your health. It's saying that at 40, you often have more leverage than you think you do, and using that leverage intentionally is part of the catching up process. Here's the shift that changes everything. Most people at 40 who feel financially behind are operating from a scarcity mindset that's been running so long it feels like truth. The belief that it's too late, that they don't have enough, that they missed the window. That belief costs them more than any bad financial decision ever did, because it creates paralysis, and paralysis is the most expensive financial state there is. The reframe is this: you are not trying to become the person you were supposed to be at 40. That version of the story is over and it doesn't matter anymore. You are trying to become the person you want to be at 60. And that person, the one with some financial breathing room, with savings that actually exist, with debt that's shrinking rather than growing, that person is built in the next 20 years, not recovered from the last 20. That's the only timeline that matters now. And within that timeline, starting today, not perfectly, not dramatically, just starting, is the single most valuable financial decision you can make. So here's what doing this actually looks like in real life, week by week. Start with clarity before anything else. Before you open an investment account, before you research index funds, before you do anything else, spend one weekend getting completely clear on your numbers. Income in, expenses out, debt balances and interest rates, net position. Just the facts, written down somewhere you can see them. This alone shifts something psychologically. It moves you from dreading the picture to actually seeing it, and you can only work with what you can see. Then identify your one biggest leak. Not every leak, just the biggest one, the thing that if you redirected it would make the most immediate difference. For some people, it's a debt payment that could be restructured. For others, it's a lifestyle pattern that's been running on autopilot for years. Find that one thing and address it first. Momentum matters enormously at this stage. One win creates the psychological energy for the next one. Then, automate something small toward your future. Even $50 a month into a retirement account or a simple index fund, the amount matters less than the habit. What you're building is the identity of someone who invests, and that identity, practiced consistently, grows into something significant over 2 decades. Review once a month, not obsessively, not anxiously, just a 15-minute check-in. Is the plan still working? Is the debt going down? Is the savings going up? Small course corrections made consistently are infinitely more effective than dramatic overhauls that don't last. And finally, find one person or one community that takes money seriously without making it feel like a personality contest. Accountability and perspective are genuinely underrated financial tools. We make better decisions when we're not making them entirely alone. You are not behind because you're broken. You're behind because life is genuinely hard, systems are genuinely unfair, and nobody gave most of us a real financial education when it would have mattered most. That's the honest